Hi everyone, I'm Sloan from SloanBella.com and I'm back with another channeled celebrity video. This one is on two people at once because they are synonymous with each other, the early punk rock movement and the band the Sex Pistols. I'm talking about Sid Vicious and Nancy Spungen, who both passed away respectively. Nancy was murdered at the age of 20 and Sid died at 6 months later. I also believe murdered at the age of 21. Now, Nancy was born on February 27th, 1958, which makes her just the generation before I was born. So she's in the late part of the 50s, which means she's all coming into that time frame at birth of leading up to the conservative movement and then into the 60s, you know, hippie, peace, love, and war at the same time. So you have to remember when people come onto the planet in any given year or time frame, they're coming through to express in a group sense a generational aspect to that group. So she was kind of in between because it was moving and changing at the time that she was born. However, she was a little kid. So what I got with her first, and she comes through for me very quickly, all right? She has not come back onto the planet. She's not incarnated in, as far as I can see. If she has, I'm not understanding why I'm picking up on this energy, but she came through extremely strong. She plopped herself right down. She kind of literally just sat on the edge of my table over there. I have a table in front of me. She just sat on the edge of it, dangling her feet because she's kind of short, and she has this big black bag. I'm a huge fan of the big purses that are like suitcases because you don't have to come home and you can just shove everything in them and you can go, go, go. That's the kind of girl I am, and she was that kind of girl too. But she's pulling out this nail polish and she's dangling it in front of me. The nail polish, that is. She wants me to know that she carried the nail polish with her, and it's something about the nail polish at the time that she died and what was in her bag and what wasn't in her bag. But anyway, I'm going back to the early part of her life because I want to start with the energy I feel with her. A lot of people describe not really liking her, not really liking how she was. She was pretty matter-of-factly. She was pretty, you know, aggressive. And I guess she caused a lot of fights with her boyfriend, with Sid, and they got into like wars, passionate, domestic violent, temper tantrums, whatever we want to call it. We've all seen those kind of relationships. And some of us have even been in those kind of relationships for years on end, okay? So there's a certain chemistry to that. But what I noticed when I looked at her chart, because she is a double Pisces. So they described her as being diagnosed as schizophrenic, which is always interesting to me because the requirements for schizophrenia and many other mental illnesses obviously change as people start to know more and develop more. But the DSM-4, as it currently states, I don't know. I mean, they might call me schizophrenic because I hear voices as well. She was that kind of a person with the double Pisces. I always look to see when I see a lot of Pisces or people with a loaded 12th house, if they've been accused of being mentally ill, because it is also very connected to a psychic aspect. Now, her sun and her Mercury were behind the ascendant, living in the 12th house in their natural position in the sign of Pisces, because Pisces naturally, natally rules the 12th house. So Sun and Mercury were conjunct in her 12th house. That gave her a very, very odd perception on life, okay? But what she's directing my attention to is her actual birth experience. Now, this is what I'm seeing. She is explaining to me that before she was born as Nancy, as she knew she was coming in to be Nancy, okay? She literally was shoved into her body, okay? I'm seeing her stuffed into her body like somebody stuffs a sausage into a bun. I'm seeing her stuffed right in there. She's not wanting to be born in this life. So all the way through the pregnancy, and again, I believe when we feel the babies in our belly and they kick and this kind of thing, they are in our energy field and their house or human body is growing here. And as it gets closer to birth, within the time frame of giving birth, the soul then integrates into the physical body. And as I've come to understand it, we have up until about the age of 4 to decide whether we're going to continue on with this incarnation. That's why so many little kids end up leaving the planet under the age of 4, because there is kind of a check and balance where you can bail off this lifetime if that's what you choose. This is my understanding from the work that I've done for my entire life. If people have differing opinions, that's good for them. But this is just what I've been learning through meditation over the time frame. And at different times, the baby will ground in so that you can feel them. That's what I call it, grounding in. When you are giving birth, the baby absolutely grounds in because it has to come out into the physical body. She had a difficult time right then and there as she was getting ready to be born. She is describing to me that her mindset and where she comes from. Now, this is an odd thing to say, and I have no idea what it means, but at the time that she was born, okay, so being born 1958, February 27th, she was in the process of coming back from another lifetime in the future. I don't know if that means somewhere else or it means in a different place, and then being shoved into this life. So her birth process was extremely difficult for her. Now, her mentality at having to stay once she got here was a huge problem. She's talking about having a computer brain, and she's talking about being disassociated from everything around her, not because she was a schizophrenic or a sociopath or a mental patient or whatever, or crazy, but because she literally was not here in this life to connect with people. She had a different vibe. It was a different vibe. And I'm not saying she didn't piss people off. I'm not saying she wasn't aggressive, none of those things. But the way that she processed her human body at the point of birth was like, I really don't want to do this. I don't want to carry this with me. So as she stepped in, it almost feels to me that she was promised in this lifetime and it wasn't her choice. That sounds weird, but I'm beginning to understand that there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes on the astral level in the other dimensions before we choose to come through from wherever the hell we're hanging out before we are born, that people are basically captured and brought into lifetime. She feels like one of these people. She didn't want to be here, and her thinking was so different. It was so different. Now, she says they made a mistake in diagnosing her. She sticks on this. I don't think she liked being called that. I don't think she liked being called crazy. Well, what she took to be as crazy. I don't think she liked it at all. She's saying, I had a different way of thinking. That does not make me mentally ill. Okay, there's that. The second thing she's saying is the way that she processed things, the way that she processed and perceived things came from, okay, she's showing me that we as human beings kind of think in a certain way, from a certain perspective. So like she's showing me this, like we're looking out a 3rd floor window, and she's saying she's looking out of a 5th floor window, and she's going between the 5th and the 2nd floor. And so she's not even catching what we see out the 3rd window. She's going up and down and around it. So her perceptions are much different. That's how she's integrating her intellect. Very smart girl, very, very smart. And she keeps showing me in her purse, she keeps showing me the nail polish she carries around. Something about her nail polish. I kind of feel like she's obsessed with her nails or nail polish, or painting them or carrying the polish, or the polish represents something else. And I may not know what that means, except I'm taking it as nail polish. I too like the nail polish. But she's showing me the bottle of nail polish that she always carried in her purse. And she's talking about it like it was the cure for everything. I wonder if she was huffing it. I'm sorry. It just struck me as funny because, okay, whatever. Anyway, she's like shaking her head, like rolling her eyes at me. But she's very matter-of-factly. And because she's matter-of-factly does not make her crazy. Her temper literally comes, and this is what she's showing me, comes from being born into a body that was like wearing an itchy wool sweater without an undershirt. That is what she's telling me, basically. She is saying when she stepped into her body, it's like she had this sensation and wanted to scratch, and she couldn't get out of her body. So it was very uncomfortable feeling for her. This is what the rage was, the undercurrent of rage, the temper tantrums. It wasn't anything anybody quote, could have done to her to cause this trauma. It was the way that she felt in her body. Like, I feel like she was shoved into something that wasn't the essence of who she was, and therefore it was very uncomfortable. Like, if somebody makes you wear an outfit, I can only describe it like this. It obviously is more in depth than this because an outfit is very superficial. But if somebody makes you wear an outfit that is not your character, like if somebody made me wear baggy shirts, like really baggy shirts, or those kind of bohemian flowy skirts, I'd kill myself. Like, I mean, I can't wear that shit. Anyway, it's got to be skin tight or I don't even like it, okay? So anyway, can you imagine being born into a body, say you like skin tight clothes, and you're born into a body that feels like a flowy bohemian skirt that's just like miles of material, and you're like, oh, what is this? This is what she's describing to me. She got into this body and she didn't like the way that it felt, okay? She really didn't like it. Now, she was also a Gemini moon, which I found really interesting. Her moon was in Gemini. Gemini, and don't get mad at me, people that think I'm hating on Gemini, you all know that you have 45 different personalities. It's just a fact. Deal with it. That is what is behind Gemini. When it's placed in the emotional sector of your chart, it can be very disconnected or very focused on exactly what is there, like what's in front of you. So you don't necessarily have to be thinking in depth. Gemini is not an in-depth planet. It is a focus planet on a lot of different things, but it's not like, let's do one thing every time. So her emotional reactions, the moon emotions, and the way that her mother responded, so there's something to do with the hormonal connection with the mother in her chart. All of these things would have caused behaviors that would have been unexplainable to other people because they were not consistent. Gemini moon is not going to be consistent in their expression, especially for a double Pisces. Now, the other thing that I noticed in her chart was I noticed that I'm just looking down. Oh yeah. I'm looking because I wrote it out here. She had, Pluto was retrograde in the 6th house. She had Neptune and Jupiter retrograde in the 8th. That is fascinating because this not only confirms my theory that she wasn't schizophrenic. She may have been a bitch, but she wasn't schizophrenic. And she's laughing. She wasn't a bitch. She said people are stupid is what she's saying. And she had to correct them. She just, you know what it reminds me of? I'm actually going to say this. I wonder if she was chastised in her early life because she didn't understand the normal social cues. And that sounds, what she's talking about, her computer brain, sounds a little bit like really, really high functioning autism and not schizophrenia to me. The schizophrenia part of her is the psychic part of her. And as I was saying, Neptune retrograde and Jupiter retrograde in the 8th house confirms that. This was a psychic life for her, but she wasn't supposed to continue on down the drug path of this life, okay? So Pluto retrograde in the 6th is fascinating because that is, or could be, now I did not look at the death chart because I don't know that we know when she died exactly, but I didn't even look at the chart for the day before or the day after. However, retrograde Pluto in the 6th house would give her an experience. Okay, camera's going blurry again. And here I go. Okay, we're back and now we're not blurry. See, it blurs out every time. I don't know. She keeps stepping in or the energy keeps blurring and like combining my mind like this. They're just fucking with me. All right, so anyway, Pluto in the 6th house retrograde could actually be indicative of somebody who had a very cutthroat business mindset or was put into situations that were extremely cutthroat. So I kind of believe that to be true. She's talking about being daddy's little girl or daddy getting, how do I want to word this? Okay, she's talking about being daddy's little girl, but not in the sense that you're thinking. I think she knows she was burdensome to her family on a lot of different levels, but I also think that she knows that her father did his duty. So she's acknowledging that her father did what he was supposed to do by being a father and stepping up to the plate, as did her mother. It was very confusing for her mother how she behaved, but she's trying to explain it like she behaved the way she did because she was in and out of different experiences in the context of what her body was doing. This to me sounds like chemicals and hormones, psychicness, and other personality traits. A little bit autistic actually is where I'm going to go with this. I'm not going with schizophrenia. That's psychic. People, when you say you hear voices, if you said it in the 50s, you were locked up and caught. Even when I was a kid, you were sent to the shrink because you're not supposed to hear voices. Well, people hear voices, people hear them all the time. People see things. It's accepted now, but still people are like, ooh, I heard a voice. It's not schizophrenia all the time. And actually, just while I'm on the topic of schizophrenia as a mental illness, keep in mind that when we're on Earth, on this plane, doctors, medics, everybody, whoever, scientists want to prove why we have what we have. A psychiatrist wants to prove a brain disorder or a brain pathway expression, which could be considered schizophrenia. I consider, from my experience dealing with a lot of people that have had schizophrenia or been diagnosed with it as clients. I'm talking, they come looking for readings, and some of them are really out of shape from their medicines at the time, and I don't mean physically, I mean mentally, and they're really discombobulated, and I've had bipolar people call me. I even one time had a girl who was being chased by the police on the news, calling me from her cell phone in the car, driving as she was being chased by the police. She was definitely off her meds. I'm not talking about that though. What I'm talking about with schizophrenia is usually, this is the background I found, there's been a very rigid, this is just my experience, a very rigid either moral or religious code within the family construct. And when these kids hear and see and feel psychic things or spiritual things, because remember, we're only here like 50, 60, 70 years. So like other shit happens. Like we don't, we go somewhere else, we experience other things. When they're told that that's not right and that they're evil, that is so heart-wrenching for their souls that they kind of split, and they're more apt to blame it on a brain disorder. And they allow that because then the schizophrenia really opens up the psychic for them and they can't shut it down. So schizophrenia is a combination of religious indoctrination to the extreme and the opening of the auric field to let any kind of entity come in. It's hard enough just being psychic and knowing what you're picking up on, and that comes through trial and error. But imagine if you're 7 and you have people telling you to pray or kneel on the Bible. I had a neighbor once too in Burbank, and they had the kid out there, the Bible on the hands, kneeling on the grass, and you're driving by and you're like, what the hell? You're like, what is that? Like, what kind of punishment is that? It was very strange. Anyway, all of that aside, you have that kind of thing and implementation, plus the fear that you are evil and what you're told evil is, as opposed to what it is, then your mind starts to split and you will accept the fact that your brain is damaged. I think it's actually that combination. In Nancy's case, I am seeing her. She's, okay, I think she was into like, she's punk rock, so she probably was into the violent aspect, whatever, bondage crap. I'm trying to think of it. It's just gone out of my head. I should know this. But anyway, the bondage shit. She's showing me a dog collar around her neck, and not with the spikes, and a leash, but she's showing me it in terms of coming from the other side and coming into this physical body. So she is being pulled into her body. This was the problem. This was the rage. This is what she didn't like. She didn't want to be here, but knew she had to be here. The trauma that triggered her drug addiction was one of two things, is what she's telling me. The fact that people didn't understand her, and that broke her heart. I'm saying that straight out. They didn't understand what she was saying. And as she was speaking and talking and tantruming and screaming and yelling and throwing things and having rageful fits and trying to gouge people's eyes out, I'm laughing, I added that one. As she was trying to do this stuff, people were not hearing her, and it drove her absolutely fucking crazy. Number one. Number two, all of the things that they described her as she continued to be described, she tried to fight back from people telling her that she was crazy, and that made her really sad, and that was the trauma that locked on her soul that put her into the drug addiction. That is what she is saying. Yes, it was her choice to do it, but her mindset about how she felt about herself allowed her to say yes to it. She's kind of describing it like that to me. There's always a trauma. She was traumatized by the fact, literally, that she was seen like garbage is what she shows me. Everybody saw me like garbage. She understands that her family did the best that they could and actually were very loving and kept up to their responsibility. But being a true double Pisces, she could feel what they felt from behind the scenes. And that's difficult for a child, no matter who you are. It's difficult. When you walk in a room and you say to somebody, you know, oh, I can feel you. And they're going to deny it. They're going to say, no, I'm not doing anything. I'm smiling. How was school? And if you're a little psychic kid, you know that you're feeling something off that person, and they may not be telling you the truth about what it is because it may not be you. But as a kid, you're interpreting it. And even as an adult psychic person, when you walk into a room and you feel that, it permeates your psyche, and you've got to figure out what it is because it will drive you batshit crazy. So this is kind of how she's describing it to me. She's also saying that it was interesting because truthfully, you could have called her a groupie, even though she's hesitant to use that word. That is what they called her. And what is with people? She's very intelligent, which I think is documented, but she's saying, what is with people calling me like, I was out for his money. I was out for this. I was out for that. Her dad gave her money all the way along is what she's saying. She gave him money. She gave him money. She made him money. They always put it on the woman. And she said, I'm not a whore because I sleep with him or sleep with other people. She did sleep around and there were fights over that. But she's not saying that doesn't make me a whore any more than it makes someone who marries somebody for money a whore. But we don't call them that. So why'd you call her that? And she was 20 is what she's saying. So I'm not saying she wouldn't have had a predilection. She is saying to me, though, that when she was doing the drugs, it made her feel like she could go back to where she came from. She actually literally had the awareness that if she used the drugs, okay, her personality was literally split. There was the girl that knew she was here that would go with Sid. And when she met him, she literally was looking for somebody to attach herself to because she felt that that was her value. She knew she was looking for something is what she tells me. She was looking for her other half. She just didn't know who it was. So she kept trying to make people fit, and Sid fit perfectly for her. She said he was somewhat shy underneath. I mean, I don't know if he was or wasn't. He was withdrawn and he was shy and he was very peculiar sexually. Okay, so even for a young man at 21, none of my business, by the way, even for a young man at 21, he had these like issues on an emotional level, okay, where he couldn't do everything he was supposed to be doing. And so there were dark moods with him emotionally is what she says. He does not come through for me, but the energy around him. And it's interesting because there's a square dancing around my head. She's over here. There's a man here. There's a man here. His mother's here. He's here, but they're not here. So the energy of them. So I'm picking up the vibe of it. She kind of is telling me, now, again, her energy is here. So I'm going to get into Sid's stuff in a minute, but she's kind of telling me that when she met him, he was very shy. He was tough. He was weak. He was immature. He was strong. So he went through this gamut of emotions when he saw her, and she absolutely knew that he was for her, but she didn't know it up until that moment. So she didn't know what she was looking for until she saw it. So you know when you go, I'm going to use a shopping analogy again. You know when you go out shopping and you're looking for something for a wedding or for this, and you're like, I know it when I see it. Somebody will go, oh, let me go pick you something up. And you're like, no, I'll know it when I see it. And you know it when you see it. That's exactly how she's describing it to me. And she's saying she went along with it. And actually, she was quite ahead of her time because now she would be seen as a really dynamic, kind of bitchy businesswoman. But back then she was bossy, dominant whore out to steal money off a kid. He was more immature than her, literally. And she was more emotionally blunted or stunted because of what I feel was like autism. Kind of getting it. She's showing me her brain and the coloring. the silver part of her brain and the lines that I see radiating from the energy really remind me of autism, is what I'm going to say. But it's not autism. It's something like that. I don't know how to describe it. I can only think of that, but really high functioning, even though she was functioning obnoxious. She's like, fuck you. It's funny. She likes the word fuck as much as I do. I like this about her. She's saying that she never really understood her physical body much. There was a feeling of like, I don't know that I really understand all of this. It was like, I'm here, I don't understand. It's so interesting for a Pisces, because a Pisces is a person that's a lot different. Anyway, meaning they're empathic, they feel. She did all of those things from an intellectual standpoint. So she talks about her computer brain. That's how she talks about it. She describes herself like that. She's obviously a vibration that came from somewhere else and basically was forced or bound or brought or tricked or gagged and kidnapped into this life. That's the way she's wording it. It wasn't what she wanted. She didn't agree to incarnate. That's why she hasn't incarnated back, and they can't get her this time. No, and you're asking the important question. Okay, wait, before I answer it, I'm going to answer it in a second. Hold on. Well, no, I'm going to answer it in a minute. I'm going to do Sid's chart now. Sid Vicious was actually born John Simon Ritchie, a proper, respectable name, on May 10th, 1957. The reason I say that is immediately as I'm tapping into his energy, but I'm tapping into it through information guides on the other side, not him. I don't feel him here. But as I'm tapping into that energy, I am understanding that his mother had plans for him. So when she got pregnant with him, she looked at him as a way for her to accomplish her plans through him. So he was literally an extension of her. We know that with children. Obviously, they come out of you. They could act like you. They could be like you. But she literally had plans for this, okay? So she saw this baby as a way for her to complete stuff she couldn't complete on her own. There's some karma in that there. So I was looking at his chart, and he was a Libra moon, okay? So Libra moon, we haven't had one of those recently, I don't think. Taurus sun, we know what a little Taurus sun does, okay? Little Taurus, little horns. Taurus, I put both horns up here. Taurus sun is interesting because Taurus comes to learn the material world, to walk the earth in its vigor. He didn't get a chance to do that. Keep in mind, he was 21. So we don't even know how he would have turned out actually in life. We just know how he started out because he was barely here. He was here for like a second. It's actually both of them. It's ridiculous. But he was a Libra moon. Now, Libra moon is interesting because the mother comes across to the child as being somewhat passive aggressive. This could be considered also as the word that's been coined in this day and age is covertly narcissistic, meaning raised by, on an emotional level, a mother who would express her emotions in an unexplainable way and in a way that he couldn't put his finger on, but that was slightly passive aggressive. He would also attract women into his life like that because we're talking about the female part of his male chart. He was, on top of it, mother dominated. What do I mean by that? I mean more things than you think, actually. But looking at it astrologically, his chart, he was a Scorpio rising. So anytime you see Scorpio on the ascendant, the female, the mother, whichever woman, could be the grandmother, could be whoever, but the female raising the child is the one that has most of the authority over the child. That's why the Scorpio risings are dark and mysterious and angry and don't tell you much and you don't really know what's going on. And they have connections to mommy. I'm saying that in a kind of humorous way, but they are connected that way because they are a mother dominated more so than any other sign. They are learning through the feminine energy, okay, the constructs of the feminine energy on an emotional level. They are learning underneath the surface to be able to express themselves in an undercurrent, not in an overt way. So basically his sun and moon were in opposition. This means also at birth, the parents are in opposition to each other. So when you have the sun in the one sign and the moon in the opposing sign, or vice versa, no, it would be the sun and the moon, or the moon, whatever. They're 6 months apart in the calendar year. So there is energy that goes between these two people. The sun is the father and the moon is the mother. Now, since he had several fathers or different fathers, stepfathers and a bio father, obviously, I looked to see where his Saturn was placed. Saturn in the second house retrograde, another one who did not get the structure from his father because the father was emotionally absent. Even if he had a stepfather that was there his entire life, it was not on an emotional level that he understood or could grasp in order to give him a solid foundation. Now, placed in the second house is fascinating, because we have many, many billionaires placed with Saturn in the house, and it's also the placement of poverty. So it's feast or famine in that house. Because it's retrograde, and in the second house is where we make our moral and religious ethical foundations or assessments as us, as us, personally to us, regardless of what we've been raised in. That Saturn in the second house retrograde is trying to force him to make decisions to set the foundation of his spiritual life, even though he was a Taurus. So it's an interesting dichotomy here. He also was born with Mercury retrograde and Jupiter in the 10th. Mercury retrograde throws all of the Taurus energy out the freaking window, because Mercury retrograde is spiritual. They're not to focus on the material. He came in with that. The other thing with Jupiter in the 10th, Jupiter in the 10th retrograde as well, this is how he became a punk rock icon. Apparently, people said he wasn't that talented at the particular craft he was in. I don't know about the bass playing, and I don't know about the drumming, but the singing, you know, that was questionable at times. However, he's the face behind the early punk rock movement, really, quite frankly. Everybody knows who he is, even little kids. Well, not little kids. It's not like, you know, whatever, but he's known in that genre. That's Jupiter in the 10th house. It's expansion in such a way. Now, his Saturn was in Sagittarius, so he needed to grow up in order to really find his direction on a soul level, but he didn't make it. And this is fascinating, because now I'm going to go into who killed who and who did what, according to what I pick up. So Nancy's showing me on the day before she was found dead, which I guess is about, I don't know, like 8 o'clock at night, the night before. And of course, you know, she was found bled out, stabbed in the stomach, bled out at the Chelsea Hotel in New York. Okay. So this was in 1978, I believe. Yeah, I think it was 1978. Let me look. I forget all of this shit. Oh, I'm sorry. October 12th, 1979. I'm like, I think it was 78. October 12th, 1979. Very interesting. Okay, so, and then he was found dead 6 months later. I think February. I want to say February 2nd. Could be wrong. That's just what comes to mind. Anyway, they were at this Chelsea hotel. Now, New York back in the 70s. Now, I didn't get there till the early 80s after I ran away. But New York in that day and age was quite a spectacle. It was, well, I think it was, I don't remember who cleaned up New York. Oh, I can see his face. Giuliani. I think it was Giuliani that started to clean New York up in the mid-80s, maybe mid-80s, late 80s, somewhere. But in the early 80s, much like in the late 70s, it was quite the fun place. And apparently they were out taking the Tuinals, the Sequinals, if you all remember from that time frame. They handed those pills out like crazy. And basically it's a morphine type sedative drug. I would call it like a morphine type. You know, you're not going to get addicted to anything unless you want to be addicted to it. Percocets, Percodan, Perca blah, 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 blah. Some had this, that, the other. I get a lot of stuff. But I am seeing them go up the stairs in the back. Now, if you remember back in the day, there was all kinds of things going on in New York City. There was, I mean, I just remember going there and like, you know, you did have to watch where you go, but at the same time, these guys would have fit right in, you know, even though they were very young, they would have fit right in, and they probably would have had, you know, quite a large amount of fans and celebrities. So people weren't like going to probably rob them or mug them on the street, maybe like they would tourists, and they weren't going to get, you know, beat up outside of the strip clubs and the sex clubs that were all over Times Square back then, and the drug pushers on the corners and the hookers and this, that, and the other. However, having said that, I do get them going up the stairs, and I don't know where these stairs are. It's kind of like they're in the back of the building, and it's kind of dark. I don't think they went up the front. I think they went up the back for some reason. I see them stopping off somewhere, and they're kind of traipsing up. It really reminds me of like back east, like the dirt that comes in on your shoes, the feel of the air, the texture of everything that goes on around. I just feel like they were kind of tired, dragging their feet up the stairs, and I see them going upstairs and then coming back downstairs. I see them going into their room, and I see them just kind of like flopping down. I see people in and out. This is a lot of people in and out before about 10:30, in and out of the house. I see, okay, as I see it, it's not a house, it's a hotel room. Anyway, as I see it, I see probably 6 people, okay, at any given time. So there's people in and there's people out and there's people in. And I know there's been theories. Okay, well, obviously Sid was arrested for it. And then he died before he could stand trial. And then some ridiculous people, because she's saying it's ridiculous, said that she stabbed herself. She did not stab herself. That's a bunch of bullshit. And now she's going to tell me who did it, because I already know. Well, I don't actually know, but she is saying that there was a person who was a manager. I don't know which manager, or if she means her manager or his manager, because I thought she was his manager. So I'm assuming there's somebody else in their peer group who is a manager. Okay, so right now she's going to tell me how it went down. So as I said, I see them going up these dark stairs. Like there's not a bunch of lights on, and it's not like there's anything around them. It's just kind of dark and shady. I'm assuming it's at the Chelsea, but maybe they went somewhere else and stopped and it's a different hotel. It reminds me of those like tenement buildings. It might not be the Chelsea, actually. It reminds me of those tenement buildings where they had people that were like, you know, taking money from the government, and they would buy all their pills and they would sell their pills. It probably still goes on now. Only it goes on in the suburbs, right? But anyway, it reminds me of that back in the day. But I'm seeing them go into their hotel room, and I'm seeing 6 or so people around them. As I said, I'm seeing this group of people. I'm seeing people in and out. I'm seeing them smoke joints. I'm seeing them drink. I'm seeing them like kind of lie back. I'm seeing them talk. I'm seeing all kinds of stuff going on. I'm not seeing anything violent. But here's what's interesting. The theories that have been spoken about when it comes to who killed who, obviously Sid was arrested, right? So people thought he did it, and why not? Angry anarchist punk rocker who was domestically violent with his girlfriend on heroin, fuck him, he did it. That's how our society thinks. And just because you are whatever, and Nancy was a former prostitute, stripper, heroin addict, just because you are those things does not mean you tried to stab yourself or you stabbed someone else. So people really have to stop with their judgment and just kind of feel what seems right. First of all, Sid did not kill her. That's what she's saying. She's saying he didn't kill me. He did not kill me. This was not in anger. This was not in passion. This was not a fight. She doesn't care what people say. She also didn't fucking stab herself. Okay, that's what she's saying. She's kind of laughing because she did have suicide attempts, but they were always attempts to get you to hear what she was saying and for her to maybe leave the planet, but she wouldn't push the envelope. She was kind of lazy at it. So she didn't really follow through. She could have one day, but this wouldn't have been it. Okay, so this is just not what I'm seeing. She did not stab herself. Now she starts to talk, and this is what I'm getting. She starts to talk about a manager person. Now, I always thought she was his manager, but maybe I'm wrong about that. I did think that. She's talking about a manager person, man, older. She's talking about this man, and he comes to her with a business offer, and he wants to go behind Sid's back, but it's a business offer. It's a business money transactional offer. He wants to go behind Sid's back. She doesn't want to go behind Sid's back, but it's a really good idea. It's going to make money, but she doesn't want to do that. She's got this wild idea that her and Sid are going to retire, and they're going to go to the country, and they're going to do something. I don't know what she means by the country, which country she means, or does she literally mean rural country, like upstate New York? I don't know. But she wants to go to the country is what she's saying. So this guy has something he wants to invest in. He wants her to go behind Sid's back and do something, and they kind of want to bring him in, but not letting him know. She's not down for that, and she listens. She knows it's not that she wouldn't go behind someone's back. She just wasn't going to go behind his back. It's not like she wouldn't be, unscrupulous. That's not what we're talking about. She didn't. This guy has another person that's in one of the 6 people. So the person that actually killed her was in the room that night. He's a white guy. I know somebody said a drug dealer had been there, or a guy supplying drugs, whatever. They were all on drugs. So like, it's not the drug dealer. They were all on drugs. It's like the bootlegger. We used to have that in Canada when I was growing up. Like, there was no liquor stores open on Sunday, so you would call a bootlegger. I'm talking in my generation. How ridiculous. Anyway, all of that aside, bars did not open on Sundays, only Saturday, because Sunday they couldn't open. Like, seriously weird. All right, so anyhow, the drug dealer is not the one that did it. There is a white guy who did it, and it was pinned on yet another fictitious person. So there's a manager who's friends with the guy in the room. The manager's not in the room, friends with the guy in the room. The guy in the room, you know what, this manager over here, tall, white, the guy in the room now, in this day and age, as I'm seeing him, okay, if Nancy had lived into her 40s, the guy would have been like pale pasty and like probably lighter hair. But back in the day, he sits there with that shitty black dyed hair and the roots growing in. So he's kind of got like weird hair, but he's a white guy and he's thin. And okay, that's all the punk rock people in the apartment. Is this going blurry? Look at that. It is doing it again. Okay, all day. I'm going to turn off and turn it on. Okay, we're back. It's been doing that all day. Every time I start talking, it blurs out just like that. You saw it, and now I turned it off, turned it on, and now I'm back. I can't deal with this, so just step back. It's her energy coming through the camera, coming closer, and their energy. So there was a manager that was not her, a male manager, and a male friend. The male friend was never seen as a suspect because he presented such a good alibi and such a good story, but he'd been there that night. This is what I see. Now, why was she murdered, you ask? Because she wasn't going to go behind his back and use him. So she actually did love him. She wasn't going to use him that way behind his back. Now, they did fight that night, but he was fucked up and passed out, okay? So fucked up and passed out. He did that quite often. Now, here's where his trauma comes in. This is what she's telling me. All right, so it's getting ice freaking cold in here. All right, here we go. Okay, I'm going to say it. Here's where we go. First of all, his mother, so Sid's mother, and I can't remember her name, whatever the hell her name was. I think the last name was Beverly. Sid's mother was very inappropriate with Sid. She was very, very, very inappropriate. Very inappropriate. She may have given other people permission to take him on little adventures, as she called it. She may have even had him sleep in the bed with her, with other people. Inappropriate. She may have even done drugs with him as a small child, 8, 9, 10. He was on drugs since then. She was both his, okay, I don't even want to say this. His mother literally crossed the boundary. She was inappropriate with him. She let other people be inappropriate. I'm talking sexually. She was controlling of him. She considered him her property. She saw him as her, is the way it's being described. It's ice cold over here. Okay. He was, now I'm getting an image from her about him. He was shamed and embarrassed, and this is why he was shy behind the scenes, and this is why he didn't speak up. And when he did speak up, it was kind of strange when he spoke up. Like, you maybe didn't know which way he was talking, and he was kind of like odd in his, because he would go in and out of being present and not present, whether he was on drugs or not. Their reasons for doing drugs were different. Nancy was trying to get people to see her and experience her and hear her, and she was so frustrated she couldn't handle it, and it was the trauma for her. His trauma was childhood sexual abuse. His trauma was over incestuous with the mother. His trauma was a trauma bond with his own mother. His mother. Now, very, very interesting, okay? Very interesting. When he died, okay, and Nancy could see it leading up to it, he was trying to stay sober. The mother did orchestrate him not being sober. She encouraged it. She encouraged it to get it out of the way, to get him out of the way, because she was afraid of being exposed, and she took the deal that Nancy didn't take from behind his back, but she too ended up dying, okay? She was the coward. I'm terrible. This is terrible. Forgive me. Please forgive me, but I am seeing it. Her lifestyle was extremely inappropriate. This is what happened. This is what happened to Sid. This is why this is all fucked up. I'm not saying he was good or bad. I'm not saying they wouldn't have beaten the shit out of each other. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying to you is he did not kill her. She did not stab herself. This was some sort of a business deal behind the scenes. Sid knew nothing about, because he was basically, I believe the band had disbanded at that time, or he was kicked out, something. He wasn't in music. They wanted to utilize him like a puppet up front. They didn't really want him to do anything, but they wanted to chain him, slave him. They wanted to slave him on a project over here. He was going to be that project. She wasn't going to talk him into it. She wasn't going to do it because she wanted to go to the country. Again, I don't know which country, if she means rural, literally trees, lakes, streams, chickens and ducks in the barn, or does she mean like back to England or some other country? I don't know, because I just keep hearing country. Okay, so there's that. And then she was actually murdered because she wouldn't participate over here. This was a full-fledged murder. He was murdered, okay? All right. So he took drugs. Yes, I know. It's his own fault. If you're a drug addict, it is your own fault. You make a choice. I get it. But that's not what it was. The last drugs he did, which they state that his mother said she did it, but she did do it. And there were 4 people standing over him as he died. As he died. She was inappropriate even at the time that he died. She got jealous over somebody that he brought home to meet her, which I assume is a lover of his. He was 21. Hello? Anyway, sorry, I'm like, fuck. This is really like kind of creepy. Anyway, whoever he brought home, whoever she met that like 2 days before he died, this woman was jealous of her child finding somebody and thought she was going to lose him again. She also took the deal from the manager. So this was done. This was done. So it was murder all the way around. And we're going blurry again. Are we really going to go blurry as we close this video out? Wait, let me see. Okay, there. Did I make it go away? I can't tell. But anyway, you saw it start to go blurry again. So I'm seeing this whole roundabout, this whole thing that's really gross. The mother was completely inappropriate. She looked at her son as her lover. And I'm going to say something that's, I'm really sorry to say it. I don't want to say it. If I offend anybody, I apologize for saying it. But he was still at times participatory in that with his mother because of the abuse throughout his whole life and what he thought. The mental illness comes in with him. He's a very damaged young man from the sexual abuse in his early life that was both farmed out to and within the family construct. But he didn't say, it's very weird. He didn't say no all the time. He did what he was supposed to do because he couldn't stand to have her not be his mother. It's very strange. Anyway, this is horrible, but that's where that came from. That's what I'm seeing. Okay, so that was very disturbing. She is kind of thanking me like that for saying it. I don't know if anybody's ever said it before or out there. I haven't heard it, but that's what I'm seeing. And I'm really kind of sad about it because it really damages somebody. And there's a whole lot of murder going on in this scenario. And again, okay, she did not stab herself. Sid did not stab her. Not that he wouldn't have gotten around to doing it. She says their fights were pretty dramatic and they were always hitting each other and kicking and throwing things and fuck you. And sometimes those are the good times, right? I'm kidding. I'm sorry. It just struck me as funny. I had a relationship like this once. Anyway, she's talking about all of that, stuff going on, but she's saying at the core of it, he was her person. He was her person. She wasn't going to go completely over the edge to destroy him. His mother did. His mother had no regard for him at all, is what she's saying. And so many things have been said about her, and really she keeps just talking about her perceptions as being different. Just a different kind of girl. That's all, just very different. She just continues to basically talk about how her family, she knew they were good to her. She couldn't feel the texture of her life, and Sid could feel everything. So it's really weird for a Pisces, she didn't feel, she went up in her brain. For the Taurus, Sid feels like a Pisces, and they kind of resonated together in such a way that it was very karmic. She is saying she was forced into that lifetime though. So there's some sort of corralling of the spiritual energy on the other side that she was unaware of. It's not a nice thing. She is talking about being tricked. This is just her way of perceiving it. She was tricked, and it was not what she was expecting. I feel like Sid was tricked out of his life. So it's interesting. They are one and the same. The two souls are actually really one and the same. There's a beginning that begins with Nancy and an ending that begins with Sid, and they are entwined together. It's lovely, if not for the immaturity. However, the expression of these two people is their expression. And although it's not like, you know, most of us want to get punched in the face in the middle of a relationship or an experience, their experience is actually their experience, and it's not to be judged. And as I'm looking at it, I'm seeing this strand. So these are two people that came together to complete a karmic cycle against their will in this lifetime. So against their will. It wasn't a choice where I feel people incarnate back in and they want to experience something. It was this completion of like going to do your time and not wanting to, so needing to be arrested and thrown in the cell. They were thrown into this life, and they are the extension. It's quite interesting. I feel really bad, but Sid is not where Nancy is. Nancy's different. She's quite a character. She reminds me, she really reminds me of a gritty person. She would have really grown into herself. I know people don't like her, but you know what? People always say that. Like, they literally say shit about every musician's girlfriend. Like, oh my God, she was such a bitch. She changed the band. I mean, okay, really? The weak man can't think for himself? Is that what everybody is saying out there? How about the guy likes who he likes? And who are you to say anything? Who is anybody to say anything about somebody in a relationship? If you love somebody, then you love them, period. Who are these other people interjecting their nasty opinions about it? She really didn't like that, because she did love Sid, and she was both an instigator and an orchestrator and a defender in her relationship. So she was all over the place. But this is a domestically violent relationship. That's what happens in them. You get into a cycle where you punch, I punch, you punch, I punch. It's that kind of thing is what she's showing me. And again, does anybody know what the nail polish bottle means? Did she carry a lot of them? Did she want to open up a nail company? What? I don't know what this is. She keeps showing me nail polish in a bottle that she pulls out of her purse, and she's like smiling and laughing, and she loves it. So that's how I'm going to end this reading. Okay, you guys, thank you. Once again, my name is Sloan from SloanBella.com.